Addiction and co-occurring disorders. Just to explain to you quickly up front, if you didn't figure it out in reading it, addictions, I think everybody knows what they are. They're basically areas in our lives or in people's lives that are out of control. And so they are driven, they are motivated to serve the addiction instead of whatever that thing that they are using being the master. It becomes the master instead of them. So those are what addictions basically are. But co-occurring disorders are mental health disorders that oftentimes, actually much of the time, accompany addictions. A lot of the people who are addicted to substances either became addicted because they had a mental health issue. Perhaps they didn't even know they did, but they've discovered that when they took a drug or drank a lot of alcohol or something of that nature, that their symptoms became less bothersome. And so they basically did what we call self-medicated. And a lot of times they didn't know they were doing that. They just assumed, boy, this really makes me feel better. So it goes from something that's casual and not that often that makes them feel better to something that becomes a daily thing, something that becomes basically 24 hours a day, and then it begins to bring greater complications because not only now do they have this struggle with a co-occurring disorder, now they have an addiction, and it has symptoms, and it creates problems, you see. And so the two together now make a compounded issue or problem in their life, and they actually feel like they can't live without the addiction, whatever it is, or survive without it. But on the other hand, the two become agitated and worsened. And so this is kind of what we're talking about. So let's jump in our outline and just go with this. People with an addiction simply don't have control over what they're doing. And I basically said that. What they're taking or what they're using. Addiction may reach a point at which it is harmful. Addictions do not only include physical things that we consume, like drugs and alcohol, but they also can include just about anything. Such abstract things as gambling, to seemingly harmless products such as chocolate. My wife says she's addicted to chocolate, but I don't see her eat that much, so she's got it under control. But I think for her it's more of a pleasure, but it can become an addiction. Okay, so in other words, addiction may refer to a substance dependence or dependency, like drug addiction, or a behavioral addiction, such as gambling or something of that nature. Now, I want you to just make a mental note. There are two categories we just discussed. Two categories of addictions are, number one, substance addictions, and number two, behavioral addictions. So a substance addiction is typically a substance that you consume into the body. It would be drugs, alcohol, that type of thing. A behavioral addiction would be something that you feel out of control about, that you do. It could be sports. Have you ever known a sports nut? It's like they live and die to watch every sports event on TV, to go to every sports event. It interrupts their marriage. It turns their kids against them. How many of you know what I'm saying? At some point you have to say, why can't you leave some time for other people or for your life? It interrupts everything. When it starts to interfere with normal life, then we begin to look at it and say, is it an addiction? Okay, we mentioned gambling. Gambling becomes an addiction. And it's like any addiction. All addictions typically start with casual use. Gambling is that way. Someone says they're going to go to Shreveport or they're going to go up to Oklahoma, and they just enjoy it. And at first they do it once a month. But before long, it's like they're going all the time. And then you have some people that just seem like they live at casinos or go to card games all the time. You know, there's a lot of card games that go on around Dallas and in hotel rooms and things like that. And people, you know, go to these all the time, and literally thousands of dollars are lost repetitively, and these people can't stop. People have lost their homes. People lose their families all over their addiction to gambling. And when it began, they thought, oh, it's just something fun. But before long, it takes control of their life, and they can't stop it. In the past, addiction used to be what we referred to as a psychoactive substance. And when we talk about addiction in the psychoactive substances, we're referring to that which crosses the brain barrier. Temporarily, it alters the chemical balance in the brain. And this would include alcohol, tobacco, and some drugs. A considerable number of psychologists and other healthcare professionals and lay people now insist that psychological dependency, as may be the case with gambling, sex, internet, work, exercise, should also be counted as addictions because they can also lead to feelings of guilt. These are symptoms of addiction. Feelings of guilt, shame, hopelessness, despair, failure, rejection, anxiety, and humiliation. So when a person becomes addicted, they start experiencing these negative symptoms. Addiction is oftentimes, most of the time, very difficult to convince a person that they're addicted. They have to come to a place, what we call many times hitting rock bottom, where they literally cannot deny their life has been destroyed by this element in their life that is out of control, and it has taken over and dominated their life. When a person is addicted to something, they cannot control how they use it and become dependent upon it to cope with daily life. This is the guy who has some anxiety problems, let's say. That's a co-occurring disorder. And he finds that work is very stressful, or maybe his marriage is stressful. Usually when one area gets stressful, how many of you know it starts complicating all areas? Anxiety is very common today. And so this guy, he figures out that if he'll go home, drink a couple beers, he kind of calms down a little bit at night. He's not abusing it at first, and it's helping. But over time, he realizes 2 beers is not enough. Now he's drinking 4, okay? And now it's not a couple times a week. Now it's every night when he comes in. As a matter of fact, he can't hardly wait to get home and start drinking because he's so anxious and he's so, fidgety and he's nervous and everything. And because when he starts drinking, his world begins to calm down and he feels like, he's getting peaceful. And a lot of these people eventually will go literally pass out. This is real common. Pass out every night wherever they've been drinking, on the couch. I've been called as a pastor to go drag people out of the floor, literally, because the wife wasn't strong enough to get him up. He was too heavy. And what this is these are guys, or they can be women as well, who have allowed a casual interest, drinking, turn into a monster that now controls their life. And so this, eventually it has become an addiction. They can't live without it. They can't do it. We have people that can't go to work in the morning without drinking 2 or 3 beers. And then at lunch they go out and drink. And they're drinking all day. Every day, all the time. And a lot of these people are what we call walking drunks. In other words, they seem to function better when they're drunk than when they're not, because when they're not, they're falling apart, and they're just having all kinds of anxiety and fear and all kinds of issues. They start drinking, their mind clears up, they become more rational. But actually what has happened is that in this case that I'm describing, a co-occurring disorder called anxiety has created an addiction in their life. And now they've got addiction symptoms and they've got anxiety symptoms battling against each other. And they come to a point to where they can't drink enough beer or alcohol. Now they're just anxious all the time, having a terrible life, and drunk all the time. And it's wrecking their family and their marriage and everything. So just give me a little bit of an idea here up front. What's a habit? Well, a lot of people have habits, and habits are not necessarily bad. Many of us can use substances or become engaged in activities without significant problems. But some people experience damaging psychological and or physical effects when a habit turns into an addiction. So we want to define the two right here. The difference is that an addiction is a psychological or physical component. The person is unable to control the aspects of the addiction without help because the mental or physical conditions that are involved. So it gets to where now they can't control it. Maybe the guy, when he's high or drunk, he's real angry all the time. Some people get abusive, violently abusive. Some people seem to actually calm down and have a more clear mind. It all depends on if they have a co-occurring disorder and other issues in their lives, what's going on. But ultimately, in the end, it becomes critical and it becomes a catastrophe. A habit is something that you do by choice. I've known guys that they wouldn't admit it, but they started out with a habit or a hobby called golf. And it evolved into an addiction. I mean, they were spending all of the family money on golfing memberships and fees and buying new clubs and all this stuff and golfing every second they got. They wouldn't spend time with the family. They were down there with the guys on the golf course. You say, how can that be? Yes, it really can become an addiction. It's like they just simply crave to get back out there. This is true for all kinds of things similar to that. Young people today, their telephones, and even some of the older people. I mean, we have got millions of people addicted to this guy. Hello? Do you know people that you can't go and have a nice lunch with because they're right like this the whole time? I'm going to tell you, that's not normal. Yet it has become normal in our society. The television. Many times as parents, a lot of parents use the television with 2- and 3-year-olds to babysit them. Well, what you don't realize is you might be creating an addiction. These young people grow up, and by the time they reach teenagers, this is more of a problem of the past in our generation. Now it's the telephone and the internet, right? But it's like you can't get them away from it. They're not happy. They're grouchy. They're fussy. They're unhappy. If you want to discipline them, don't spank them. Just take away their TV or their telephone. Their life will come crumbling down. See, these are addictions, folks. They start out as habits, but they become addictions. People are getting killed on our city streets because otherwise innocent, good civilians, moral people can't take their eyes off their telephone long enough to see the car in front of them. I mean, these are what addictions do. So, to put this simply, with a habit, you're in control of your choices. With an addiction, you are not in control of your choices. It's that simple. Addiction to substances or activities can sometimes lead to serious problems at home, work, school, and of course socially. We're going to talk about social disorders. Some people can't go to anything where there's going to be more than 3 or 4 people, but what they have to almost get drunk before they go. That starts out as a medication. Oh my goodness, they say, I've got to go to a party tonight, and I just can't stand to be around people. They have all kinds of emotional problems concerning being around crowds of people. That's a social disorder, okay? So what do? They have learned that if they take a couple sleeping pills, hello? It starts out with something over the counter. That it calms them down. They go to the party, and they do great, Okay, but eventually it's more and more sleeping pills. Now over-the-counter medicine's not doing it. So they start looking for prescription drugs, and prescription drugs leads into illicit drugs. And now you've got this CEO of the largest bank in the city of Dallas. I'm making this up. I don't even know who that is, okay? So don't run out and say, he said you're an addict. No. But these are the people oftentimes that are addicted. We often think it's just the homeless people on the streets. It's just that kid down the block that's always stoned. No, listen to me. America's addicted are people that are sitting in our church pews. They're people that are running our corporations, medical doctors. Many of them are addicted to drugs. Many of the people that are driving you in buses, in Lyft or Uber, they're addicted to substances that put your life and their life in danger, and you may or may not know it. And they do it not because they want to harm themselves or somebody, but because they don't have any choice. They are addicted, okay? So the causes of addiction vary considerably, and we don't understand all of them. However, generally they're caused by a combination of physical, mental, circumstantial, and emotional factors. So it's a makeup of different issues and different factors that kind of can lead to someone's being becoming addicted. See, we're all different. And our chemical makeup in our brains, our ability to handle stress, to deal with problems, our ability to deal with even things like fatigue and things of that nature make us all different. And we all have different strengths and weaknesses. And if we don't learn, and if we don't teach our people how to go to Jesus, amen, to get our strength, to get our peace, don't take this wrong, but to get our high. Okay, in other words, spiritually speaking, if we don't learn how to go to Jesus, if we don't teach our church how to go to Jesus, they will find themselves at times in their life where they are feeling out of control, and they will feel so panicked or so fearful they'll start reaching for something. They'll go see the doctor. It's an overwhelming problem today how many people are addicted to prescription drugs, which at some point the doctor is going to say, no, I'm sorry, no more. Okay? And when he does, their life crumbles. And you know what they're going to do? They're not going to stop taking it and just say, well, the person you think would never do it will be looking for someone on the corner who's selling that drug. I've watched it as a pastor. I've watched it as a counselor. And it's just a reality and it's a fact. These people are bound. The devil's got a grip on them in an area of their life, and his intention is to control every aspect of their life and ruin the lives around them. And this is what addiction does. Addicts eventually reach the place to where they are trying to satisfy that craving within them. The problem is it always takes more. It always takes more. It always takes more. Okay? That's why oftentimes drug dealers will give a kid or a person their first one free. Because they know there are some drugs that you can become addicted to on the first hit. And if not that, they know that if you enjoy it, you'll come back and get some more, and you'll pay next time. And they know that eventually you're going to become addicted like all the rest of their junkies and everything. And it doesn't matter to them if you drive a Mercedes, you wear nice clothes, and you sit in a fancy office all day. They don't care. They just want your money, and they want to be able to just suck you dry. And so addicted people get to the point to where literally they will do anything to get their fix. We're going to read, but I'll go ahead and tell you anyway. Addicted people usually reach a place where they're stealing from family, from friends. They're stealing from anybody and everybody, everywhere they go. You don't want one working for you because they're a hazard waiting to happen. Not only that, they're going to steal from you because whatever you pay them is not enough. It takes about $1,000 worth of stolen merchandise in order to produce a $200 a day, which is what it takes for the average addict. They need to spend $200 a day on their drugs just to keep their head straight. And so most people can't get a hold of $1,000 a day or $200 above whatever they're making, so they have to steal it. And you know the first place they go? They go to mom and daddy's house and steal. They steal from their wife. They steal from their babies. They do. Addicts have empty refrigerators. Addicts have the electricity cut off on them all the time. And it's their families that suffer. And so I guess I'm doing a heavy build-up here but in the very beginning. But these are the things we're going to talk about. And then we're going to talk about how to help them, okay? Addiction, often referred to as dependency, will often lead to tolerance. So everybody remember this. Dependency is when it gets a grip on your life. You become dependent on it. Once you become dependent, there comes a point to where you tolerate it. Tolerance is when let me just read the notes here. The addicted person needs larger and more regular amounts of whatever they're addicted to in order to receive the same effect. Often the initial reward is no longer felt. The addiction continues because withdrawal is so unpleasant. According to the Lexicon's Medical Dictionary, addiction is a habitual, psychological, or physiologic dependence on a substance or practice that's beyond voluntary control. Most of us know this. We've seen it. We've come in contact with it. Withdrawal. These are some words and definitions we need. Withdrawal has many meanings, one of which is a psychological and or physical syndrome caused by the abrupt cessation of the use of a drug in a habituated person. So withdrawals present differently. It depends on the drug they're taking. Some are worse than others. Believe it or not, alcohol is one of the worst and most dangerous withdrawals. People who are trying to get off of alcohol, they're, for a period of time, they're in life or death situations. More people typically will die from alcohol withdrawal than some of the other drugs. And a lot of people didn't realize that because, we have, for some reason in America, we have a lighter opinion of alcohol. It's kind of like, alcohol, you can get addicted, but it's kind of like we just sort of permit it, I guess because it's legal,